And there we go. All right, guys. So, like I said, we're talking about the foundations of civil rights today. We're going to talk about the basis of what makes civil rights civil rights. We're going to talk about the time period of 1945 to 1960. Were there other advances in civil rights during this era? Sort of, kind of, yes. But we're going to talk about the main culprits. We're going to talk about the main events that happened and the order they happened in. And then we're going to come back to civil rights a little bit later. So we won't get into the movement, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, the Chicano movement. We're going to get to that stuff in a couple of days. So with that being said, let's get started, right? So our objective, we're going to explain how and why the civil rights movements developed and expanded from 45 to 60. So prior to 45, there's no real thing you can point to and say that's the civil rights movement. You know what I mean? There's some people that are like, hey, this is unfair. And then that's kind of where it ends, you know? But from 45 and on, post-World War II, essentially, you can start to see little pieces of the civil rights movement, then a full-on civil rights movement. So let's get into it. First key point of the day, seeking to fulfill Reconstruction-era promises, civil rights activists and political leaders achieved some legal political success in ending segregation, although progress towards racial equality was slow. And I want to add was extremely slow, especially in what parts of the US do you think? So, you know, there's a specific part I'm thinking of where racial progress or racial equality is going to progress very slowly. I'll give you a quick 2 minutes to get the key point down. About a minute and change. About 1 minute left. With the last 30 seconds, or those of you that are finishing up can finish up, somebody want to tell me which region of the US is probably going to struggle most with this racial equality idea? Like, which region's probably going to be slower to be okay with some of these changes that are going to come up? Even the legal ones, honestly. Yep, the US South, exactly. Good. And by the way, it's not just the racial equality stuff. They're even going to be slow with some of the political and legal successes that are going to happen. And we'll talk about all that in a bit. So let's go to move forward. Where are we at? There we go. Okay, so if you guys remember, Reconstruction was kind of a big fat mess post-Civil War, right? There were a lot of promises made that failed. Part of why these promises fail is because the South was able to institute Jim Crow laws, literacy tests, poll taxes. And then we had a court case known as Plessy versus Ferguson, which made segregation not only legal, but made segregation the law of the land. Now, do you guys remember the term military reconstruction? Really quick yes or no. And if you do remember it, just quick yes or no, first of all. Let's see that. So then what was military reconstruction? Anybody wants to tell me that? What made it military? What did the military do? In the South specifically. And if you don't remember, just put don't remember. I can talk you guys through, but this one's important. This is one that we got to remember. A military presence in resort. Yes, perfect. So there's a military presence in the South and they made sure reforms were carried out. You're pretty much right. You're exactly right. The laws that were supposed to be put in place post-Civil War, right, like the idea of, hey, freedom for all men, equality, all that good stuff, was actually enforced, right? The vote was actually enforced because the military was there to make sure the South couldn't do anything. But very, very quickly, it seemed quicker than it should have been, right? The South was able to take control of their states back, and African Americans in those states were kind of, they lost those rights that they had for that very short period of time. Civil rights activists are trying to get the government to make good on that deal, right? You promised us something, we have not been getting it. I think when I talked about American Republicanism with you guys way back, I said that the ideas of America are like ingredients, and America itself is, I compared it to like a pie, right? Where it's like liberty, individual rights, self-determination, right? All these things are really good ideas, and they're really good parts or pieces or ingredients in like a really good piece of pie or piece of cake, whatever, right? And not all people are not getting their own fair cut of the pie at all times, right? You got African Americans, whether it be Hispanics, whether all sorts of people, Irish immigrants, right? And the whole idea behind a lot of these civil rights act movements is, hey, all we want is our fair share of the pie, right? We want what you guys have been having for so long. Just give us the equal part, right? That's all we're asking for. And that's where a lot of these movements kind of get their steam. So I'll give you a quick minute on that, and we'll move forward afterwards. If you need more than a minute, please let me know. But again, it's all about that equality. Or, you wrote this check. Another one way you put it is like, you wrote this check during the Civil War. It's time to cash it, right? You haven't made good on your promise. We're asking for you to do that. That's basically what a lot of these movements are, specifically with African Americans, but other groups as well. And we'll get into other groups in a bit, in a few days, when we talk about civil rights in earnest. About 10 seconds. If you need more time than that, let me know. All right, so key point 2. The 3 branches of the federal government use measures including desegregation of the armed services and Brown versus Board of Education of 1954 to promote greater racial equality. So I'll give you about a minute and a half to 2 minutes, and we will talk about how each of the 3 branches, for the most part, helped in these early years to progress civil rights, helped civil rights move forward. Kind of showing at times it wasn't really the federal government, it's a lot of these state legislatures. At least when I look at it, that's kind of what you start to see, right? It's a lot of these states that are going to do some of the worst things here, some of the worst, at least at the very least today. Today, some of the worst atrocities we'll talk about were committed by states, not so much the federal. Not to say that the federal's hands are clean and all this stuff, but at the very least, they're trying to fix it, which, again, right, we judge with that time in the past. But again, we'll see. I would be curious to hear what you guys think about the federal government after today's lesson, because those are 2 very different things. I would actually really want to hear what you guys think about that. About 10 seconds. If anybody needs more time than that, please let me know. Otherwise, we're going to move forward. All right. So President Truman on civil rights. So Truman took over for Roosevelt, right, for FDR. And post-World War II, Truman signed, well, not just post, very post. Truman signed Executive Order 9981. This bans segregation in the armed forces. So President Truman will ban segregation in the armed forces. No more African-American only units. No more, segregated military, like the way they were in World War II. He ends that. However, it's not necessarily enforced until 1950 when the Korean War starts, but it will be enforced. And from this point forward, there is no more segregation in the military. Why do you think Truman's able to just, with a snap of his finger, desegregate the military? Why couldn't he do it in the South? Because for reasons we'll get into, he can't. Why does he do it in the military? And if you have no idea, put no idea, but take a few seconds, think about it. Why do you think he's able to just desegregate the military? He clearly doesn't really like segregation if he's willing to do that. So why is he able to do it so quickly with the military? Why does it take him longer to do it everywhere else? And again, if you have no idea, then put no clue. Don't know. It's 8 a.m. Stop asking me questions, right? Like, but if you have an idea, or if you think you might, share it. I'm curious to see what you guys think. A few more seconds. Why do you think? Nothing. I got nothing. Nobody. Everybody's dry. It's all. It's too early in the morning. It's 8:15. So Truman, as president, has direct control over the military, right? He's commander in chief of the armed forces. So something that is inherently federal, like the military, is something Truman can very easily desegregate without fear of retaliation from southern states. So he doesn't do too much. He does some, but he's genuinely worried that he will lose support from the southern states if he does anything more. So to an extent, you know, that's basically why he's able to control the military, and the states can't really, they have no ground to stand on if they tell him he can't do that. So it's a safe call for Truman, but it is very much one of the earliest examples of a president being like, no, this isn't okay, right? Kind of like how Teddy Roosevelt was the first guy to invite a black man to the White House, right? There's like to have dinner in the White House, not in the White House, to have dinner at the White House. But it's all of these little things that kind of step forward, right? Lincoln talking to guys like Frederick Douglass, like, it is baby steps. It is baby steps. And if you don't acknowledge the baby step for the big step it is at the time, you're doing a disservice to the people of the time and to the ideas of what these things mean. As much as, you know, we see a lot of this stuff and we know it's wrong. Actually, no, they knew it was wrong too. It's, how do I put this? It gets back to that idea that some of these ideas that we all know to be true and fair and correct and proper were not then. They were dangerous ideas to have. It's part of why I have old college professors that to this day hate Texas Rangers, because when they wanted to vote in the 60s, Texas Rangers were the ones trying to stop them, the ones arresting them and then letting them go, the ones calling them things like, you know, dirty Mexicans, and like it's a whole thing, guys. And we'll get into a lot of it when we talk about civil rights a little bit more. But so again, he's able to control the military. It's why Truman's able to do it so fearlessly, because he won't do it too many other times. So another positive thing Truman does is he puts in place the Committee on Civil Rights. It was created in 1946 by Truman, a little before he desegregates the military. And they were tasked with finding out the conditions of civil rights in the US and trying to address the problem. So desegregating the military is one thing that they wanted, that they were calling for. They wanted to abolish poll taxes. They wanted to provide federal support for lynching victims. They wanted to end segregation. These were some of the tasks that were the goals of the Civil Rights Committee. They got some of this done too. Congress will pass the 24th Amendment, which abolishes the poll tax. That's why poll taxes are illegal now. So they do get some work done, but here, so early on the first slide, you see the president, the executive branch, making strides towards civil rights, at least in the positive direction for the first time. Now you've seen Congress do it. They've made a constitutional amendment banning poll taxes. And constitutional amendments, as you guys should know, are not easy to get. So I'll give you a quick, probably a little less than 2 minutes, so that we can get that stuff down, and then we'll move forward and we'll talk about probably one of the bigger Supreme Court cases of the last 60, 70 years. About a minute and change. About 35 seconds. All right, let's go ahead and move forward. So how about Brown versus Board of Education? So Brown versus Board of Education ended racial segregation in schools. So if you remember from before when we talked about Jim Crow and we talked about Plessy versus Ferguson, segregation was not only the law of the land, but it had, especially in the South, this is more in the South than anywhere else. What's the word? Entered or infected is a better word, probably. All aspects of society, whether it be school, waiting rooms, bathrooms, buses, trains, water fountains, swimming pools, you named it, segregation had been involved, right? Well, in this Supreme Court case, a guy named Oliver Brown, whose daughter had to attend a black school over a mile from her house and instead of being admitted into the white school around the corner. So that's the issue, right? Oliver Brown wants his daughter to go to school that's closest to his house. It's right around the corner. But due to segregation, she is not allowed to do so. This is in Topeka. Now, the three men on the right side of, or by the way, are the three lawyers that are responsible for the case. Now, the argument that segregated schools violated provisions of the 14th Amendment was made. So if you guys remember the 14th Amendment, right, the best way is free citizens vote. So the idea that African Americans are citizens of the United States, right? If you're born in the United States, you're a citizen, then you are supposed to be treated equally and fairly under the law as a citizen, right? And the idea that schools are segregated is a violation of that. Schools are inherently not equal if they are separated. So that's the legal argument being made. So I'll give you a quick minute and a half for the legal argument being made so you can analyze that, and then, or so you can get those notes down, I should say, and then we'll talk about what the decision was. Actually, before we talk about the decision, we're going to do a quick image analysis. About 30 seconds left. All right, we're going to move forward. So like I said, we're going to do a quick image analysis. I'm going to give you 2 minutes on the clock. I know it is early. I know the brains are dead, but let's wake them up. 2 minutes on the clock. I want you to analyze this image and tell me everything you see. Save it for the timer going off. So start typing, but don't hit enter yet. What is being protested and why do you think these people are protesting? Try to get beyond just racist. Try to get beyond that for why, but at the very least, racist is probably a little bit obvious, but try to get a little beyond that. But if not, do your best. Again, 2 minutes on the clock starting now. What are you seeing in the image? What is being protested and why? Again, do not send it to me quite yet. Send it privately, but start typing it and hit enter when the timer goes off. What are you seeing in this image and why? What do you see in this image? What is being protested and why? You are correct, but what else? Or why? Ooh, good. Yeah. Think about what this image, what can you see in like about the era, right? Like what does this tell you about the era? Good responses so far. About a minute left on the clock. Should hear from everybody for this one. Good one, yeah. About 45 seconds. About 20 seconds, then we're going to move on and talk about this stuff. All right, guys. So if you've responded, if you haven't responded, send it to me. Send it in. Timer is up. Now, we're going to go ahead and talk about some of these. So I'm going to read through some of your responses. Thank you to those who did participate. I appreciate that. That'll reflect really positively on y'all. So a few things we saw, right? Right away, this idea of like, hey, you know, don't race mix. We're purebred whites, right? We're pure whites. This is bad, right? Pure race mixing being protested. Yep. Another one we saw is most of you guys pointed out the communist signs, right? Now, let me ask you a quick question. Do you think that these people actually believe racial mixing is communist, or do you think that they are just using the word communism as a trigger? Trigger word, right? Yeah, you're right. People fear McCarthyism, but these people are racist. They're very racist. They are not good people, at least in my opinion. They aren't dumb. They are dumb, but not that type of dumb. They don't think that race mixing is communist. At least I don't believe they do for the most part. They are using it as a trigger word. Yeah, it's an excuse, right? They're using it to get other people that are maybe on the fringe, or that they're smooth brain, or they're using it to get other people that are maybe on the fringe, right? Or that maybe don't believe what they believe to believe what they believe, right? They're using that McCarthyism against society, if that makes sense, right? So good call on that, guys. But they are using the communist thing, right? People like Stalin and Hitler said America was like a mongrel race of people because we were mixed race. Mixed race is what makes us strong. These people are fools. Anyways, that's funny. But yes, so they're against the segregation, right? They're against desegregation. They're against mixed racing, I should say, or race mixing. They are very, very much against all this stuff. Now, the reason these people are so angry and up in arms and protesting and using their American flags as this horrible, horrible shield for their hate, which is not what this is supposed to represent, right? It's because they lost. For one of the first times in U.S. history, they lost big time. And this is a good thing. And yeah, it's true. They lost big time. So the Supreme Court, yeah, it's true though. This is the first time they lose. The Supreme Court actually had people's backs. Look at that. The Supreme Court overturned Plessy versus Ferguson, right? And if you guys, this is something you got to remember, right? Plessy v. Ferguson made segregation the law of the land. Well, Brown versus Board of Education basically decides that separate education facilities, the idea of making them separate, is inherently unequal, right? The thing we knew the second we talked about Plessy versus Ferguson, right? Like, how can it be separate and equal at the same time? That's what the Supreme Court says now. It can't be equal. The fact that it is separate makes it unequal. So they ordered that all schools be segregated or be integrated, not segregated. They ordered that the Supreme Court orders all schools be integrated with all deliberate speed. What does all deliberate speed mean? Really quick, what does all deliberate speed mean? Don't read ahead in the slide. What does all deliberate speed mean? What do you think it means? Nothing? All deliberate speed. What does that mean? What are they telling them to do? Immediately, yes, do it fast. Do it right now. Integrate all the schools. Do it right now. That's what all deliberate speed means. All deliberate speed, do it now. Right now. However, it is just vague enough that some Southerners are going to take a long time, right? Because they say, well, you told me to do it deliberately, so I got to think about it and be deliberate and do it carefully. Southerners will disagreed with this deliberately and furiously. So a whole lot of Southerners, Southern legislators, Southern lawmakers, governors, are very, very, very against this decision and are very, very against this integration of schools, right? So segregation is separating, integrating is combining. That's why you get protesters like these people. So I'll give you a quick minute and a half on the slide, and then we'll talk about what happens when you have a federal government that's trying to right some wrongs and state governments that do not want those wrongs righted, because that is basically what's going to happen post Brown versus Board of Education. And it's what happens in a lot of schools, by the way, on smaller scales, when schools try to get integrated or when certain students, African-American students, try to go to certain universities. Did you guys see the movie Remember the Titans? Any of you guys seen that movie? Yep. But have you guys seen that movie? Anybody? It's a football movie. I think it's on Disney Plus. If you haven't, it's a good movie. Check it out. That's in the late 60s, though. And it was, yeah. What was posted on Twitter? Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. And we'll talk, that's in the 60s. So we're talking right now, guys, mainly in the 50s, right? The foundations. We will get to that. I know who exactly you're talking about. It's Ole Miss, wasn't it? I think it was Ole Miss. Might not. Yeah, 50 cents. So you think 50 cents is a lot? You should see how much it costs to apply now. That's why it's one thing IDEA does really well is it pays a lot of those fees for you guys. Yep, it is. It is. Believe it was Ole Miss, the school you're talking about. We'll get into that stuff in a bit. But for now, let's talk about what happens. Let's talk about some of the retaliation of this, right? So we talked about the president, right? The president says desegregate the military, right? The president trying to do what he could. Then we talked about Congress, right? 24th Amendment, abolish poll taxes. Congress sort of trying to do what they can. Now the Supreme Court finally rights a wrong and overturns Plessy versus Ferguson. Hey, you can't keep things separate but equal. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. It's inherently not equal. Get rid of that, especially in schools, right? Fix them all now. Well, Southerners, very upset by this, created something called the Southern Manifesto. This was written by Southern Congress members. I think it was like 19 senators and something like 80 congressional members. And its goal was for Southern states to uphold their rights to be what, right? Their rights to be racist. There's no other way to paint this, right? There's no other way to paint this. They're wanting to uphold their rights to be able to segregate schools. Like that's what they wanted. I'm all for step back, right? Look at things through the lens of the time, but there is nothing you can really do to justify these people's actions, unless you want to start thinking like a Stalin or a Hitler or any of those guys that think mixed racing is bad. Like, unless you're going to start thinking like those people, which is what these people are basically doing, it doesn't make sense what they want, but they don't want it nonetheless, right? They argued furiously about these school changes, especially. Some states will even shut down their schools to prevent integration. And then we're going to talk about something that's going to happen in Arkansas, where all of this is going to come to a head. But the governor of Arkansas is going to try to play tough with the wrong guy to play tough with, really. And we'll talk about why in a second. So I'll give you a quick 2 minutes. Again, Southern Manifesto, Southern states trying to defend their segregation rights, which aren't rights at all. Can't have a right if it thwarts another person's right. That's not how rights work. By the way, I might say some stuff that's a little absolutist, a little more absolute than possible, but because, you know, this stuff kind of upsets me sometimes. Because it's so recent, guys. Like, there's very good chance you know somebody who was around during this time, whether it be a grandparent or a great-grandparent. Yeah, it's true. And if you guys, and again, I can't stress enough, right? The whole concept of mixed race is part of what makes America so awesome. It's why we're such a cool country. It's why you got things like, you know, you can even point out to little things like food or bigger things, right? Like the Erie Canal. It's also why other not so great countries thought we were weak, right? It's why Hitler wasn't afraid of America. They're a bunch of mixed race mongrels. That's what he used to call Americans. Like, they're not going to do anything. Like, to think that there's people that have similar thoughts in the U.S., it's upsetting. The mixed race is what makes it cool. It really does. I mean, I like barbecue. Don't you guys like barbecue? Or Tex-Mex? Or spaghetti and meatballs? But I digress. I'm going to stop ranting about race. About 30 seconds left on the clock. And then we'll talk about a poor little governor who tries to talk tough with a very famous Nazi fighter. Talk about Orville. Really? Cannot stand spaghetti? Oh, so you eat too much spaghetti. Have you tried like baking a ziti? Baked ziti is really good too. A little bit of meat sauce or red sauce. Sorry, I'm talking about Italian food now. All right, guys, let's move forward. So there is a governor in Arkansas that will protest Brown versus Board of Education. His name is Orville Faubus. Orville. He's got a name like Orville. This is Orville right here. And he's going to call the Arkansas National Guard. He's going to call soldiers in from the state to prevent 9 black students from entering Little Rock Central High School. These 9 black students will be known as the Little Rock 9. Because the Little Rock Central High School was set or designed or timed to integrate. And this Orville guy is like, I'm not going to integrate it. I refuse. And he called in the National Guard. Well, here's what happens to him, right? He calls in soldiers to prevent these students from entering the school. But Truman's not president anymore. Dwight D. Eisenhower is. No, it's not even going to get to that. Do you guys know who Dwight D. Eisenhower is? Do you guys remember that name? Real quick, yes or no? Who do you know what he did? Why he became president? What he's famous for? He fought the Nazis. So Dwight D. Eisenhower fought the Nazis. Do you think he's afraid of a governor named Orville? No, he is not. Dwight D. Eisenhower was the general supreme commander of the Allied forces in World War II. He fought the Nazis. He fought the Japanese. He's not about to let some governor tell him what the federal government can't do. So Dwight D. Eisenhower sends federal troops to protect the 9 students as they enter the school. So it doesn't have to be students versus soldiers, because you're going to have American soldiers coming in to protect the Americans and let them enter the school that they have every right to be in. This included the 101st Airborne, guys. The 101st Airborne are Nazi killers. They are not afraid of a bunch of National Guardsmen. And they are not going to they're going to escort, and I'm going to show you some pictures in a bit, these students into the school. They are going to escort them in and make sure that they can make it into the school. So I'll give you a quick 2 minutes to get the info down. All right, a little bit more time, about a little under a minute, and we'll move forward. Again, these 9 students will be known as the Little Rock 9. We won't quite go into their names here, but I do want to show you some images of a couple of things. The first recorded Karen in American history is in some of these images, as well as a couple other things. I believe I have the one with the soldiers not letting them in, but if I don't, I'll show it to you right after, because that's what's interesting. State governor tries to stand up to these students and intimidate them with soldiers, and Eisenhower says, not on my watch or not. It's kind of it's one of those moments that's kind of like, oh, good. There's still, like one of those restored faith in humanity moments, really, when you ask me. Okay, let's move forward. So here's some images. I don't have the picture of them being denied, right? So here's the first recorded Karen in American history. I'm going to go ahead and say it. She's basically asking for the school's manager. Here are the 101st Airborne. You can see from the patches here, right? Walking these students up the steps and into the school. This is literally what had to be done. Now I'm going to look for the picture. Oh, no. Yeah, it really is though, right? But by the way, they dealt with this for days going to school. Like, just imagine walking to school and having people yell at you on your way just for being you. It's basically what happened. Now, I do want to pull up the picture of one of them being, here it is. This is the This is the state guard, the Arkansas National Guard, not letting them in the school, not letting her in the school. This is where Eisenhower said, y'all can't do that. And then he sent federal troops in to kind of put them in their place. Yeah, well, part of it, right, is they kind of had to be, and there's a lot of really, 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 really good interviews that the Little Rock Nine give. Like, if we had time, I would show you guys. I recommend, look them up. They gave plenty of interviews afterwards. They all graduated from Central Little Rock High School. And they talk about their experiences a lot. Again, you do not have to go very far back to find somebody who knows somebody who had to deal with this stuff. Miss Evans, the world history teacher here, I believe her dad was in the first integrated school in San Antonio. Like, went to the first integrated school in San Antonio. Like, it's not that long ago, guys. Just part of why it can be even more upsetting at times. But this is what had to happen every day for a while. It didn't happen forever, but for a while, this is what needed to happen so they could get to school. Something as simple as going to school. When we get into the 60s, we'll talk about university students that have to be escorted by U.S. Marshals because there's rioting in Mississippi. It's pretty intense. Now let me ask you a question. Well, let me ask you guys a question. Really though, when you look at these images, does this look like the America that you know, or at the very least, the American ideas that we should strive to be? Is that what this looks like? Or does this look like something worse? Or something different? Does this look like America? Because like when I see this, I get some pretty strong feelings. Doesn't, right? In America, you shouldn't have to have armed troops guide you to school. You should be able to just go to school. Yeah, you're right. You're not wrong. So it's a really powerful time in U.S. history, right? I genuinely believe that, and I'm not the biggest Eisenhower as a president fan. I don't think he does very much as a president. But if there's a weaker man in office, I don't know if these students get to go to school. I really don't. Because say what you will about Eisenhower, he's not about to back down from some governor telling him what he can and can't do. You know what I mean? So I think the reason this happens, the reason that you have racism integrated into Southern society this way is because of the failures of Reconstruction and because of Jim Crow. Because former Confederates were able to hold public office like a couple of years after the Civil War. And they were able to integrate or put in policy that was very, 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 very anti-Black and very, very pro-white Southerner. So it's Reconstruction's fault. Really, real talk, it's probably because Lincoln died. Because I really genuinely think Lincoln might have been able to pull Reconstruction off because nobody else of his time could. But he was killed. Because again, he was going to pardon a lot of regular Southerners, which are a little more in the middle. And he was going to make sure that high-ranking Confederates were never able to like vote or hold public office again. But because of all the different iterations, that's not what happened. But again, you know, we can only try to move forward from this. But again, yeah, this is America. This happened. Can't hide from it. Again, I recommend on y'all's time, if y'all have time a little bit, not if, when y'all have time today at some point, look up on YouTube some Little Rock 9 interviews. It'll be really interesting for you guys to see, I think. Whether it's from the time or whether it's from a little bit after. If you just Google them, like you'll see a lot of them when they're in school and versus like, here's them a little older. Or a lot of older. They're closing in. So this is I don't really do this too much, right? But that's the Little Rock 9, by the way, and this is Governor Orville. I would recommend writing this sentence down at the end of your notes or at the front or at the top or wherever. This is like the one sentence that breaks it all down. From 1945 to 1960, there were some advancements made in civil rights, but not without intense opposition. And once you guys get that down, we'll talk about the exit ticket. Exit ticket's coming up.
And guys, why were they, what's the opposition to, like, you know, desegregation? Who is opposing it? Oh, not all at once. It's not like your microphones work or something, you know? Yeah. Yeah, great. Thank you, Janessa. All right, Alyssa, gringos. Hey, that's a dead word. We don't use dead words. Okay. Okay, I'm being recorded. Noted.
Yeah,
Good
you're
morning,
being
everybody. Hey, Mr. Cavazos is actually going to get a guest speaker to. No, Janessa, not like that. You guys, all right. You guys are the reason I'm coming back next year. But Mr. Cavazos is actually going to get Mrs. Evans, whose father was in one of the first desegregated schools in San Antonio. So you guys might actually get to hear her story and ask her some questions. Doesn't that sound fun, everybody? I know. Contain your excitement, Ava. Angie, you alive? Who else we got? I'm just going to take over.
Go.
Let's see. We got Sophiana. Good morning, Sophie. Savannah, Ricardo, Max. Morning, Max. Maylene. What's up, Maylene? I see you. You ready for the game today? What's up, Lorenzo? Lauren. Man, what's up, Josh? Jay. What's up, Bacta? Isaiah, are you even awake right now? I doubt it. Janessa, Edgar Tirado, listo para hoy. Dale más. Devin, Desiree. What's up, Gates? What's up, Bree? Ava, Angie, and Alyssa. Wow, there's like nobody here. Thank you. Good morning, Max. Man, you guys, it's like, hey, it's March. You guys
8
don't
a.m.
have mics at work?
No, we do. I think we just forget that we're muted.
Yeah, sure thing, Jonathan. Oh, wait.
Wow. Okay, I'm taking that as an offense.
All right, guys. So, like I said, that was about it. We're done. So if you go into Google Classroom, your exit ticket should be there. If it is not there, refresh because I just assigned it. And it's a pretty straightforward, easy peasy exit ticket. All you got is hip the image of the racist boys and then answer the question.
Yeah, and it's not like you guys have access to the internet at all. So if you have any issues with that, ask Google
Or ask me.
or us.
So that's it for me, guys. I'm actually going to stop the recording. I got it.
The weird oil in there.
Okay. So what do I do with
You
this?
just put in one of those bulletproof K-cups.
Okay.